very much appreciated Brigadier General's Pawlikowski's personal remarks, and it's always nice to hear something supplementary put by our colleagues. In my regard, I would point out the fact that I'm a child of the 90s, so I basically was the beneficiary, or direct beneficiary of the peace dividend of the Pax Americana, as we sometimes call it. So that meant that by the time that we got into the European Union and I became a law student, whenever we talked regarding EU law about these military exceptions, we always went through it like, yes, the military thing, whatever, because, I mean, no one really expected. We couldn't really imagine that that war would happen so close to us, and that these provisions would ever matter. So that's the spirit in which I started my research on this very interesting topic, and it's quite a new topic for me. I'm more into international economic law, but this was a very interesting area to explore, and I hope I can make an interesting presentation for all the specialists out there as well. So when I started my research, I immediately noticed a bunch of letter words. It's just a series of policies, of different treaties, of institutions, of legislation, of different programs, and this is just a selection of what I encountered personally while I was writing this book chapter that I based my presentation on. And these are, of course, all aimed at development. So these are parts of structures of integration that we want to see happening. And these are all aimed at the Common Defense Platform, the European Common Defense Platform, the European Common Policy on Defense, a European Common Policy, a European Defense Industrial and Technological Base, and all of that. So we really, and these are just some of the more recent. I mean, there's a bunch more. And many of these projects actually didn't really get us to where we wanted to be, it seems, and from a defense industry point of view, well, not at all, it seems, and some of that was touched upon by my colleague earlier. There are these numerous declarations, right, and politicians seem to know what they have to do, and that's I thought it was fitting to use this quote by Jean-Claude Juncker. He was at that time he was still I think prime minister or something of Luxembourg, when he said, "We all know what to do, but we don't know how to get re-elected once we have done it." And this is, of course, reflecting on the matter of defense industries. Well, it was a tough sell to say, well, we need to invest in defense. It was a very tough sell to our electorate, or for politicians to their electorate. I'm not a politician, but indeed now there's more support for it. So there's statistics on the matter, and we see that it's about 2/3 or 3/4 of the population of Europe actually support investing more in defense, and they support working together more, etc., etc. So there's a bunch of interesting statistics on that. I included them in my chapter. I don't want to get into too much into the weeds of it. But so the project was to establish a European defense technological and industrial base, and there was this a strategy that they worked out in 2007 to establish it. And through this myriad of policies, the European Union actually proposed to broker a deeper cooperation between the member states with the aim of strengthening this European defense technological and industrial base. The member states, in the meantime, while collectively at the European level, they seem to be in agreement as to what they needed to do. Individually, everyone was doing their own thing, so everyone was doing whatever they wanted, they perceived as being in their interest. which most of the time was a sort of protecting their industries. So what we see in deficiencies is mostly stems from that. And then the industry players, well, the industry players really don't have a say in it. Large industry players would take what they could get. So I can get a little money, I can maintain some of my production capacity. I don't need to completely break down my production capacity. I can maintain it at a minimum level. Okay, that ensures the survival of the company. Maybe better times will come, but until then, at least I don't have to close the whole thing down. And then that's the larger players in industry. In our part of Europe, it's a thing of survival, right? So a lot of these industry players are just glad that they can still exist. Because if they would be left to the open markets, if we truly have, as I will show, what we don't, a European defense equipments market, that would mean that these smaller industrial players would be, in effect, victims of free trade, and a bunch of these companies could not compete. So they would either be acquired or straight up would be closed down, and business over. So industry players were taking what they could get, and then the European defense technological and industrial base, as a result of this, was as fragmented as probably the policies are, and it's a fitting reflection in a way. And the European defense equipments market, well, it's at the least, or at the most, it is dysfunctional. At the least, I think we would call it non-existent. So there was this 2007 strategy to work on the European defense technological and industrial base, and for the integration of national defense technological and industrial bases, right? So the DTIB would become the EDTIB, and the purpose of this was to achieve self-sufficient industrial base that could provide security for supply at the level of the EU, not only at the level of member states, which is also only just partial. So in 2013, they went about evaluating what happened to the implementation of this strategy, and the European Commission's analysis is dismal. So it called for the revision of the entire thing, and they called for new policies, which we obviously see appearing almost every year. The EDIS is just the newest iteration of basically the same thing that we have known about for 20 years and we have been discussing for 20 years. Common acquisitions, let's pool our resources, let's use economics of scale to better our industries, to better our armed forces. And we see none of that happening. So I'm not exactly sure how a new set of strategies and policies would help this. Maybe the funding itself would help it, but as I will or as I will later touch upon, this is not exactly sufficient. So we need even more policies, even more things, but more funding schemes, right? More investment methods, and the use of structural and cohesion funds was flashed back in 2013. So it's been 11 years since we have known that maybe we should be using more funds to encourage industrial cooperation. Even more importantly, this revision of the strategy called for harmonizing demand, right, synchronizing procurement, engaging in joint research and technology projects, and this all to develop it. And so what happened in the past 10 years? Well, we don't really have anything to show for it. But now with the Russian aggression against Ukraine, Europe feels again unsafe, and so there's, as I said, very high support for engaging in more spending in the defense industry. The problem now becomes not that of what is the magnitude of spending, but what is the capacity of production? And then we see the deficiencies appearing there seriously. I mean, as Tamás mentioned earlier, there's a lot of acquisitions going on from off-the-shelf acquisitions, which further fragment the defense industrial base, and that's just a few iterations. But this is just the newest. This is just the newest iteration of what has been going on for decades now, and we can't seem to be able to stop this inertia towards this thing. And there's also the other problem of collaborative spending, which is that of juste retour, right? This concept of every member state is expecting to get back at least as much as they had invested in it, which, well, from our point of view, from a Central European point of view, that's just deepens the divide between us. And so the plan seemed simple in 2009 when they adopted the European defense package, right? Put these two directives together, one for procurement rules, one for transfers rules, and then you would get a European defense equipment market. And how simple is that, right? Well, wrong. It's actually much more complicated than that, and it seems to not be working. So if we look at into the details of the Defense Procurement Directive, and I didn't put it on the slide, I just put on the slide the main reason why it doesn't work, and we addressed it at the end of the first section as well, with Dr. Gimler very eloquently presenting the deficiency of this of our endeavors of collaborating. So the Commission established these common procurement rules with the aim of opening up markets. With this, it was envisioned that member states would freely announce tenders, and anyone would be able to apply, so that the best provider would obviously win. And there is a massive impediment to it, the effectiveness of this, in the form of this exception in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. But of course, there's even more. There's even more exceptions within the directive that can be used fairly efficiently. So you would see exceptions concerning government-to-government contracts. You would see exceptions on cooperative research and development programs, or on contracts awarded under other international agreements, and agreements such as the NATO or the Organization for Joint Armament Cooperation, which is an agreement between some of our Western neighbors. As well as this exemption, and thus the Defense Procurement Directive didn't really have any effect on this culture of secrecy that actually characterizes the military procurement the procurement sector. This was shown also by subsequent reports. So there are a number of reports made by the Commission, some reports by the Parliament, and then there's a bunch of analysis on it at the level of scholars looked into it, and everyone is saying basically the same thing, that these policies, while they have a nice ring to them, they don't actually deliver what they were meant to do. There was also an interpretative note of the European Commission from back in 2006 on how to interpret this exception, and it just, we have it, we know, we have the information, we have the policies, we have the discussions, but there's actually just no willingness from the part of member states to engage as they should have. And this may lead us, or at least it led me to believe that in some sense there was an interest of the member states to, on the one hand, let's show some willingness to collaborate, but on the other hand, let's maintain these exceptions because we actually do need them. The other part of the defense package was the directive on transfers. This was created with the purpose of improving the European defense equipment market by streamlining the rules and procedures regarding the cross-border transfer of defense-related products. It was expected that these rules would bolster the integration of supply chains and increase security of supply, again, as in the other case. And then if you take a look at this platform called CERTIDER, I mean, even for a layman like myself, looking at the platform, I immediately noticed that it's scarcely in use. So they don't really, it's not really applied. So all in all, there has been some reduction in practices such as single bidding, contracts awarded without a call for tenders, but at the same time, the rate of, for example, contracts awarded through non-open procedures went up. And there are also statistics on it, and for those of you who are more keen to learn about it, you will see more of it in my chapter. So what we see is that member states, and I stressed this earlier as well, there's a lot of protectionism going on, and it's heavy protectionism. But some industrial players, right, would not survive without it, which would reduce the rate of industrialization in some member states, leaving people without jobs, and more crucially, the state without a secure supply of weapons and equipment. And of course, there's considerations of security on the one hand, but the social considerations as well, which for some politicians would be a bit difficult to swallow, the consequences thereof. So this is bad from the viewpoint of defense efficiency and interconnectedness in any case. And this is the main idea. This is what they wanted to help. The industry should have been engaged in helping out with interconnectedness, with efficiency, but that obviously cannot happen when there's a lot of protectionism involved, and then industry players tend to be also enjoying this protectionism. So it's very difficult to get out of this sort of a rut. Data already shows that there is this east-west imbalance in the defense industrial landscape, and this has only increased with the expansion of the EU. So opening up the defense markets would stress it more. And so from our point of view, from a Central European point of view, what we would like to see is that these acquisitions of weapons come with more investment, right? So then we take up the question of funding cooperative spending, and there's the percentage, right? As my colleague earlier stated, the percent of collaborative spending in 2020 was at 11%. I highly doubt that went up significantly. We'll see in the new reports. So it's at 11%. The benchmark used to be at 35. Now it's up to 40. By later, we would want to have it at 50%, and that's a massive gap in between those two numbers, right? The fact that member states still apply this domestic first policy in defense procurement, it may mean that the consolidation of the European defense industry will more likely be industry driven rather than policy driven. But as industry is enjoying protectionism, I'm not sure that is able to happen. It must also be mentioned that protectionism is at fault for having this fragmented European defense technological industrial base, but that member states also seem not to be trusting of each other, that they would genuinely open up markets. So I feel like everyone is peeping at the other, like, are you going to open up your market? Because as soon as you are, I have some players who would be interested, but I myself, I might not be that interested in opening up my own. So there's a back and forth and an issue of trust there as well. And then to the question of wider collaboration at an EU level, well, if we think about the collaboration between just 3 member states, I think it was regarding exactly the Eurofighter program. The program was more or less stagnating for a longer period of time because the member states that were taking part in the program were fighting sort of amongst each other who gets to do which part. And when you have that among 3 member states, you can imagine what that would result in at the level of the 27. It's just very, very difficult. And we see the difficulties also with the level of funding being where it is at, 8 billion at the European Defence Fund, and then the European Peace Facility and the ASAP program were being used to support Ukraine. And what we had with with the Ammo Act in support of ammunition production, we saw that that didn't work out, and that actually demonstrated the significant failure that we have at the level of industrial capacities. And then we have the question of protectionist procurement, whereby, as I stated earlier, the member states are interested in having more having industrial development come with a simple acquisition, right? So no one wants to just buy a tank. They want to buy a tank, and they want to buy the servicing facilities and the technology and obtain all of those goodies that come with it, and also justify the spending in terms of, yeah, but we spent it on tanks, but we also brought in jobs. So there are some member states that are doing that. The problem here is that when you bring in more outside technology from, for example, from South Korea, like we've seen in neighboring countries, or from outside of Europe, you will have more fragmentation and just more lack of interconnectedness. So that brings in more troubles. And I would just mention as well, again, with regard to the question of how much we are spending, it's not an issue anymore. We have way more money than we have capacity. And one of the best examples for that is that when Chancellor Scholz announced the Zeitenwende, he announced 100 billion euro extra spending on defense, and it's 2 years later, and there's little to show for it, and that's exactly, again, a problem of the capacities of the defense industry. So there is money, but there's these ways that we do business that is not conducive to expanding production capacity. And we don't talk about these in terms of like corruption. So the favoritism in acquisitions is not a problem of corruption, it's only protectionism. But if we look at the same techniques used in regular civil acquisitions, we usually call it corruption. Right, so there's also ways about outcompeting the US, and the US has the US Buy American Act in defense, and probably we should be having something more or less the same. But then if we have an EU Buy Act, that would also put us on a collision course with our greatest NATO partner, because they are directly disinterested in us having a unified European defense equipment market. And this is not said by me. This was said by the former ambassador of the US to NATO. So it's like that. And so just to note the fact that I'm a child of the 90s and I went over my time a bit. But if you want peace, I would recommend that we actually prepare for peace rather than war. Thank you very much.